Viteria and Zolin stand back outside. "This has been such a long and difficult journey for all of us," Viteria says. "It's almost hard to believe it's all over. What are you going to do now?" "I guess I'll just go wherever the road takes me," Zolin says. "When we were younger, my friends and I all dreamed of becoming adventurers together. Now, it looks like I'm the only one left to keep the dream alive." "No," Viteria says. She walks up to Zolin and puts a hand on his shoulder. "You're not the only one," she says. Zolin turns his head to Viteria. The two of them exchange a smile, and then walk off into the distance together. The inside of a Veltkindish longhouse can be seen. The floor is covered in straw. In the main room, there is a fireplace in the center above which hangs a pot, and there are some wooden benches and a throne along the walls. A wooden partition separates a back room with beds. Zolin, Viteria, and Ioana all stand in this back room. They all look a few years older. "Once upon a time," Ioana says, "I probably would have tried to take care of the dragon problem myself, but now that there's no more magic, I knew I couldn't handle it on my own. I was very fortunate that an old friend happened to be passing by." "So you really still consider me a friend?" Viteria asks. "Of course," Ioana says. "The past is the past. Instead of obsessing over what has happened, let's just be happy for what is happening. Besides, I got the chance to meet your dashing cousin." Zolin blushes and chuckles bashfully. Viteria rolls her eyes. "I know adventurers travel for a living," Ioana says, "but if you ever want a place to stay, know that you will always be welcome here." "We have been traveling for a while," Zolin says, "and at this point, I think we've seen more of the world than most people get to see in a lifetime. I have been thinking about settling down. I guess I've just been waiting to meet the right woman." Zolin winks at Ioana, and this time, she is the one that giggles coyly. "My cousin and my best friend? Really?" Viteria says. "Well, I guess I'm just going to have to learn to get used to it. It looks like we're all one big happy family now, huh?" "Yep," Ioana says with a pleasant smile. The three of them share an embrace. The source of magic's perspective. Zolin and Viteria may believe that Katrina and Artis were the evil masterminds responsible for this dark and convoluted series of events. But in reality, I have been the one pulling the strings from the very beginning. Magic was supposed to be a gift to help people achieve greatness. For a long time, I had seen too many people abuse this gift. It was Neri's actions which finally convinced me that magic was too dangerous to remain a part of the world. I had to set in motion a series of events that would end in my destruction and the passing of this blight known as magic. But of course, things are never simple. There was only one way I could be truly destroyed, and this knowledge was known to absolutely no one but myself. For me to be truly destroyed, someone had to become fused with me and then die. Since the fusing binds our two fates, their death would mean mine as well. So, I had to create a series of events that would bring someone who wanted to use me here, but also bring someone who wanted to destroy me to kill the user after we became fused. I will admit it was incredibly difficult, even for my ancient and wise mind, to come up with a plan to accomplish this. I know a lot of the steps in my plan relied far too largely on luck, but this entire plan relied on luck. Zollan and Zara were the last direct blood descendants of the original Guardian, and thus, the only ones I could directly speak to. If I did not fulfill this mission within their lifetime, then I doubt there would have been any hope left for the world. To a small degree, I could use my own magic to affect the world. To begin with, I manipulated the placement of the books in the library to make sure Katrina would see the legend of the source. This planted the seed in her mind about using me to reach her goal. Next, when Zara and Zollan were mature enough to be physically and mentally ready for this arduous quest, I spoke to them in their sleep. Since they never fully learned how to speak to me directly at any time, sleep was the only time they were sedated enough for me to be able to speak to them. Although I cannot directly speak to other people aside from the Guardians and their closest blood relatives, the relationship between Zollan, Zara, and Dewan, combined with his own unconscious state at the time, allowed him to see a fraction of my message. This was exactly what I wanted. Now that I had planted the seed of use into someone's mind, I had to plant the seed of destruction in someone's mind. I knew, after what Dewan had seen in his lifetime, if he had reason to believe someone planned on using me, then he would see destruction as the only option. Now, I just had to draw him to Zollan and Zara to convince them of that. Unfortunately, this is where I started having to rely to some degree on luck. I knew it had been years since Zara and Zollan had even seen their father or cousin. Katrina was their closest friend and Zollan's former lover. If Dewan and Viteria just came out and said, "She's using you, you can't trust her," this would likely have ended in fatal conflict between them. Even if they actually believed Dewan and Viteria, then it would have just ended in Katrina's death, which I couldn't have either. I had to find some way to put just enough doubt in Zollan and Zara's minds that there would be no more conflict, either against Dewan and Viteria or against Katrina, while simultaneously finding a way to convince Dewan and Viteria to put their conflict on hold by decisively showing them how difficult it would be to convince Zara and Zollan of Katrina's treachery. I had to find some way to get all of them to put their conflict with each other on hold just long enough for them to reach me. To start with, I conjured the storm to ensure they would all have to hide their faces under hoods when they first met each other. Neither side could know who they fought. Not yet. Then, I conjured the wind that blew Zara's hood so Dewan could see who she was and retreat. Just as I hoped, the fact that they retreated when they finally knew who they were fighting was the perfect reasoning to convince Zollan not to fight them anymore. I knew Katrina and Artis would start to feel uneasy about what had happened and do anything to keep their plans from unraveling. They would have to resort to some kind of more direct treachery. If Zollan could see a hint that some kind of treachery was going on, it would plant the initial seed of doubt in his mind and ensure the end of his conflict with Viteria. At the same time, the way Zollan blindly did exactly what Katrina and Artis wanted him to do showed Viteria that it was too risky to directly oppose them in front of him. Thus, they kept an uneasy peace, and both users and destroyers made it to the finish line. When Katrina thought all hope seemed lost, I told her what she had to do. I told her that we had to become one. although I could not directly speak to anyone but guardians, since she had direct control of me. Just like Dewen, she was able to hear a fraction of my message, just enough to get her to do what I wanted. Yes, sacrificing Zara and Dewen was all in accord with my plans. I did not like having to sacrifice them, but sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Funny, even though my goal was exactly the opposite of that of Katrina and Artis, my methods were remarkably similar. This whole conflict was never a matter of good versus evil, like Viteria and Zalin may believe. It was all a matter of different groups with different ideologies coming into conflict with each other. Those in either group determined that their ideology could not coexist with the other. That does not necessarily make one ideology good and the other evil.